All right, hey guys.
Hello. Hey, say hi, third hour. All right. So this is a special recording. We are going to tape the lecture here, and we are with the coolest third hour world history in 2016 that has ever existed.
They didn't seem very excited.
Yeah. All right. So here we go. You want to take this?
Sure. So Japan. We haven't really talked about Japan at all. Japan is an archipelago. Cool word, archipelago of islands. It's not just one island. It's lots of islands all together. There's 4 main islands though, and I will butcher all of their names, so I'm not even going to. But there are 4 main islands, and throughout history, they started out with small tribes, just like any other place that we have had. One of the major tribes was the Yamato clan in 500. They became the first dynasty, and they created the Shinto religion, which I'll have a picture here in a second. Kind of goes with those arches that you see in Japan. It's a very nature-like religion, like a lot of other clans around the world. And they claim descendant from the sun god, which brings us to the rising sun aspect that we start to see when we start to think of Japan in World War II. So that's a very quick kind of early Japan history. This Yamato clan kind of came together and started centralizing themselves, had a really lovely court in Edo, which became Tokyo, and wealthy families started living there, and eventually we get up into a bigger dynasty. There we go.
So let's see. In 600, Shotoku. Now see, as you guys know, my bilingual nature, if I get into the talking like that, so if I sound like I am trying to talk like I am Japanese, I'm trying to become Japanese for you. All right? All right. So, is it? To become Japanese, is that a song?
I thought. Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
So Prince Shotoku sent missionaries to China to trade and learn about their culture. So there is like I said, a very unique relationship between China and Japan. Technically, there's not a lot of love between the two countries, but that's more of like a modern thing. A lot of the early development between China and Japan was a lot of sharing and trading of ideas and exchange of cultures, and mostly going from China to Japan. They were the ones Japan was a lot of the ones that like, oh, China has Buddhism, let's pick up Buddhism. And then they kind of modify it for their own kind of personal beliefs. So we can see that when the Tang dynasty fell, lost the urge to continue traveling to China, because we know that during the Tang and the Song dynasties in China, things were going very well culturally and economically for them, right? Now, you don't know this, but you should, but we're kind of stepping forward, is that after the Song dynasty, the Yuan dynasty takes over, and that was a dynasty made up and controlled by who? Mongols. And so the Mongols didn't keep that kind of tradition, and so the Japanese were like, we didn't want to go and hang out with them. And not to mention that Kublai Khan, the Yuan dynasty leader, was trying to invade Japan.
The Mongols tried to invade Japan twice, getting ships sailing out there, and then a tsunami came and destroyed all the ships. And that actually made the Japanese think of themselves as higher than the Mongols, saying, look, here's what the gods did. They came in, had a tsunami, and got rid of all of the Mongols coming in and trying to get us. So obviously we're the better people because the gods like us more.
And interesting note on that is that when that typhoon came in, and like Kublai Khan's like invading Mongol army into Japan was so huge that it was going to be like just a simple like butt whooping. But when this typhoon came in, and I mean, what are the chances And when, like Ms. Firehammer said, when the Japanese see this, they think that, they have God on their side. They're more protected and all that. Do you know what they called those typhoon winds? Kamikaze winds. And during World War II, what were those pilots called that flew their planes into American ships?
Kamikaze.
Kamikaze pilots. And so the word kamikaze means divine winds or winds from the god.
So we've got rising sun, kamikaze, that Japan during World War II got a lot of its ideas and a lot of its stuff from earlier Japan history. So lots of connections here.
So we get to the feudal system here. And like we said, this is very similar to the European feudal system because very decentralized, and it was kind of like military governments were trying to run the show.
That's what a shogun is. It's a military government. A military ruler comes in. The emperor is there, but he doesn't really have a lot of power. But this shogun, this military ruler, and you can see a lovely picture of that guy with that cool head thing and his cool horse. He's like the real head. And so this shogun, Yarimatu Minamoto, took up power and established this first shogunate in 1192. And it lasted for a pretty long time. So what he did is he split up governing duties among different daimyos, which are like lords over in Western Europe. So these daimyos would go out and they'd have their little sections of lands, and then those daimyos would then give other section of lands to samurais, just like you have the king in Western Europe, the lords, and the knights. You have daimyo, or you have shogun, daimyo, and then samurai.
So let me, if I am correct in my thinking, Ms. Firehammer. So a shogun would be similar to a king? Or a shogun would be similar to
a shogun, I guess, would be similar to a lord, and then the daimyos would be similar to vassals. I forgot that stuff. And then the samurais would be similar to knights.
Similar to the knights. And then they'd both have peasants that would do all the work.
Tons of peasants.
Tons of peasants. So the emperor is essentially the same as the king.
Yep.
All right. So everybody got that out there in TV land? Yay! All right. So more of the feudal system. Samurai. Now, obviously they say like they're compared to the knights in Western Europe. Now we know that the knights in Western Europe had a chivalry code that kind of guided their behavior and their treatment of
women and lesser people like the peasants.
And so the samurai did as well. And go ahead.
It's called Bushido. I believe I'm going to butcher all these names. And it's praising bravery and absolute loyalty. Now, we learned about those knights. And those knights were part of like the Crusades and everything. We learned about that. A lot of those knights were going out in the Crusades just for their own personal gain. So they had loyalty, yes, as part of chivalry, but they also kind of did their own thing too. Samurai, if you did your own thing, if you did something for your own personal gain, that was just the worst thing that you could do. They highly praise bravery and loyalty within their code.
And so, like, if you were a knight, and this is where like cultural differences come into play. If you were a knight and you committed a sin,
you just go to church.
Who did you ask for forgiveness? God, right? And so God would be the one, you go to church, whatever, you ask for forgiveness and you or the absolvement of sins, and there you go. The knight would be he'd be okay.
He'd feel better.
Because God forgives, right? But they don't have Christianity in Japan. They don't have this kind of forgiveness of sins concept to them. They have a code that is more like followed here on earth. All right? And as a result, this seppuku was a ritual suicide. Seppuku?
I'm not entirely. Seppuku?
Say seppuku. Does that sound better if I say seppuku? Seppuku. All right. Bushido.
That is ritual suicide. So literally, if they did something wrong, if they did something for personal gain and they felt terrible about themselves, they have a special sword Not that long sword that you all think of when you think of samurais, but a special short little sword that they would learn to then punch into their gut and commit suicide. That was how they resolved their sins.
There was a emperor. There was a grandmother who was taking care of this like shogunate's son, and the shogun had died, and so it's kind of this lord had passed, and the next thing, this kid was supposed to be the next in line. They were losing this battle that they were in, so that the samurai that were guarding and trying to win committed this, how do you say it? Seppuku. And then the grandmother with the child tied themselves to an anchor because they were on a ship and threw themselves off and committed seppuku as well. And so this idea of like honor and code and all of that ran very, 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 very deep within the culture and society.
Continuing our connections to World War II, that goes with the kamikaze pilots, because the kamikaze pilots, their main function was not to fly over and bomb things. Their main function was to fly somewhere, crash land, and explode. Obviously, then the pilot would die. So that was their ultimate bravery, their ultimate sacrifice was to go in, and that was how they were going to kill people, by exploding their planes. So ties back to World War II and back to that seppuku.
The last shogunate, and this Tokugawa shogunate, leading Japan up to kind of the modern age, where they are no longer able to keep the rest of the world out. And the U.S. and Europe kind of forces their way into Japan and forces trading with them. But it's this Tokugawa shogunate that sets up this government and does about as good a job as unifying Japan and centralizing authority as best as you're going to get.
And the way that they did that is the leader would stay in Edo, which is now Tokyo, and he'd have his central government there, and he'd have his lords. So this is the daimyo out there, and he'd have his. No, that's the shogun. Wow, that's the shogun in Edo. He'd have his daimyo lords, and they'd have to come into Edo once a year all together to talk about things, and then they could go back out to their areas of land that he gave them. But their family had to stay in Edo all the time, 24/7. So that was a way of saying, hey, like, don't rise up against me, because your family's with me. If you start rising up against me, your family's just down the road. I could probably send some samurai down there, cut off their heads. So you probably should stay with my rule.
Makes sense? Makes sense. It's like Godfather kind of ish kind of stuff, you know, like, hey, you mess with me, I kill the family. So, here's a picture of.
Last slide here, just a picture of Edo and kind of what the city looks like. That was the head of the Tokugawa shogunate. So
Sweet head. You know, if any of their Pistons fans out there right now, is it Baines, their backup center right now? I think he's got a similar haircut to that guy right there. So it all comes back around, fashion does. It all comes back around. Anyways.
I think that's it. We're going to end with that all comes back around fashion. And
parting is such sweet sorrow.
Bye, guys.
I love you. Meow. It's awkward. I'm trying to stop. Oh no!